This is about a larger systemic change about the kind of system we operate in.
I believe that this is the moment that we need democracy more than ever.
We need more people of all types of backgrounds to step up and offer their expertise to solve the challenges in each of our communities.
Let's do what we know to be the right thing and be true to that inner voice. I didn't ask to be treated differently, but I'm going to take it on because I have a job to do and nothing's going to get in my way of doing that.
Go get yourself a political home. You know, Vote or Lead would love to be that home. Black Voters Matter would love to be that home for you.
Thank you for your support. Thank you for leading and running as you are. And I have your back.
Thank you. I appreciate that introduction. And I must say that I am a bit humbled to be here right now, especially going right after Representative Harad. You know, you're doing some amazing work, and I wanted to just like chime in and be like, yes, this is exactly what we're working for. To provide you a little bit of additional background, so I did spend a lot of time working with autism and developmental disabilities and mental health. That includes a little bit of drug addiction, as well as some other kind of more traditional mental health like depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, that type of thing. But in the past few years, I actually left St. Louis. I'm born and raised in St. Louis. I left St. Louis for many years. I was in Baltimore and Atlanta and Los Angeles. And then I returned to St. Louis. Interestingly, it was after Michael Brown. I actually remember flying home when the announcement was made that charges were not going to be brought. I was actually at a layover in Texas. We got grounded as a result because the protest came to the airport, so I couldn't get home that night. And I remember thinking, like, I'm out in LA and there's stuff happening in LA, but I want to be home. Like, I had that personal connection there. Interestingly, my parents are also from Denver, Colorado, so there's that connection. And Tashara Jones is actually a good family friend. She's very, very close friends with my sister, who is a few years older than me. So I was hearing all of these things and I was like, well, you know, maybe I'm a little more connected than I thought. I moved back to St. Louis in 2016, a few years ago. And at that time, I kind of took my passion for social justice and the fight against isms and blended it with my company. I had the joy of doing that because I own my own company, and I finally had gotten back with my network of people here in St. Louis, and we started focusing largely on public service organizations, so firefighters, police departments, city managers, politicians, those types of things. And so I still work in education. I actually teach at SLU, St. Louis University, and do some other things. But to kind of give you that premise and additional kind of experience in this world, right now, the majority of my time is actually focused on teaching diversity and inclusion training to police officers, which is a very interesting place for me to be. I did not grow up with positive relationships with police officers. I grew up and mostly as a result of watching how police officers treated me differently when I was by myself or with my parents, and how it changed drastically when I was with my friends. So getting pulled over for speeding would look totally different. I remember coming home from college and I was driving the car. I had 3 friends in the car, 2 other females and 1 male, all Black. And we got pulled over and the police officer told me to get out of the car. And I remember asking, like, why do I need to get out of the car? I've given you my license. I've given you my registration. I was a little bit mouthier when I was younger. And he said, I need you to get out of the car and I need you to come with me to my car. And immediately I'm like, am I under arrest? Like, what did I do? What happened? He made me get into the police car. He let me get in the front. And he said, "Are you safe?" And I said, "Right now or when you pulled me over?" He didn't really appreciate that very much. And he said, "In your car when I pulled you over." And I looked at him and I was like, why wouldn't I be safe? Like, I'm driving my own car with my friends. We're going home from school. I was at Truman State, which is in rural Northeast Missouri at that time. And he was like, "Well, I just didn't know if maybe, you were in trouble given who you're with." And then he added in, because I was still like, I don't understand this. Like, let me go back to my car. This is ridiculous. And then he added in that the young man who was sitting directly behind me was looking at a pornographic magazine. And I was like, first of all, he doesn't have anything in the backseat with him. All of our stuff is in the trunk. So I know you're lying to me. And even if he was, he's over 18 and that's his prerogative. I don't really care what he's looking at. And the police officer did not want to talk with me much further after that. I got a ticket and I was sent on my way. Needless to say, I didn't quite get out of the ticket on that occasion. But that's to kind of tell the story of, I have many, many, many more stories of this. And so I grew up with a huge juxtaposition of knowing that when I'm in one set of environments or with a certain set of people, I'm treated one way. And when I'm with a different set of people, I'm treated a very different way. And it was exacerbated by my interactions with police officers. So getting into this, and getting to know police officers very intimately has been a very emotional experience for me at times. But I feel like this is where I can hopefully make the greatest impact. I can start to change the justice system if I can start working on the point of entry. And I think that's where some of like mental health, accountability and things like that come into place. So it's important. Hopefully you guys have, I'm sure you're here because you believe it's important. Really quickly, one thing that I would like to know, just to kind of keep you guys chatting and thinking about things. Actually, can we go back one slide? But to thinking about things, what is one thing that maybe comes to mind as you're looking at these bullet points? When I say why police forces are different from maybe other organizations or institutions across America. So I premised it in accountability, training, and pattern of community interaction. But does anything come to mind as you're looking at these bullet points? Anything triggered? Any emotions that you're having right now? Also, if you could just maybe type it in the chat. And then we can go to the next slide as you guys are typing that out and thinking about it. So main reasons why this is so super important. I don't think I need to talk about it a whole lot because, again, Representative Harad and Vanessa did a really excellent job of framing things up. But one thing, when Vanessa was talking and telling us to envision places where we felt safe, where we felt like we belonged, where we felt like we were welcomed, I'm curious to know how many of you had police officers directly or indirectly in those scenes where we thought about feeling safe and belonging. And I'm wondering when we felt unsafe, if police officers entered into that picture or frame as well. And so I want you to kind of carry those images with you and reflect on them as we're talking. And you know, kind of putting those things together, because ultimately police officers should make us feel safe. Historically in America, police officers were set up to make certain people feel safe. And that history is super important. And it's one that we don't often talk about because it's one of those difficult histories. It's one of those uncomfortable histories, but no matter where you were in America, the Northern Police Force and the Southern Police Force were set up separately, but they were both actually set up to keep a certain population safe? And so let's walk through this kind of with that lens. And I see a couple people say that for them, police officers are safe. And I see on the other side that you rarely feel safe when police officers are around. And I think that's one of the reasons this makes it a difficult issue, is that we have varying degrees of kind of when we, our interactions, our history, our learning about police officers. And Lisa, yes, in the South, police officers and police force are descendants of the slave patrols. In the North, they're a little bit different, but then they kind of came together in this great blend of messiness. So if we go to the next slide, we will jump in. So the first thing is accountability. And, you know, as kind of somebody who works with lots of different types of organizations, this is something that comes up so often. The problem with policing is that ultimately for private businesses, even nonprofit businesses, even the owner or the CEO has some level of accountability because their consumers hold them accountable. So if I'm making a product or I'm providing a service and I'm doing a really crappy job, then nobody's going to come back and buy from me. Nobody's going to continue to work with me. And so I have that accountability worked into my organizational structure, even if I privately own that company. The problem in the police force, and there are some other governmental institutions, are that accountability is not there, right? So ultimately, the consumers of police services are citizens. But if citizens are highly upset with the way that police are functioning, the chief is not fired. The chief doesn't have that direct and immediate accountability, and businesses usually operate on quarters, right? We hear the quarterly reports. We look at stocks in that type of way. You know, they talk about their profits and make their plans. But really the largest level of accountability, especially for chief of police, sometimes they're elected. So that's like once every couple of years. So that kind of taps you into like, I can kind of do what I want until people start thinking about elections. And then maybe I need to really work on my accountability, unless something egregious happens. Mayors are sometimes over police chiefs, but the disconnect between what the mayor is doing and what the police chief is doing is often huge. They're in totally different buildings most of the time. The mayor doesn't really get wind of anything until something egregious happens, right? Something huge happens. Other times there's like a city board that's governing over the police chief, but again, there's that huge disconnect. Well, what happens with that is that you then have lots and lots of inconsistencies. And we can look all across America and see that there are some police forces that are being run in certain ways, and there are other police forces that are being run in very different ways. There are some police forces that are out in the community and have fairly positive relationships. There are other police forces that have very negative relationships. And St. Louis is especially fun because we have, I think it's 52 different municipalities in St. Louis County. That's not counting St. Louis City, and that's not counting over the river in St. Charles County. So these 52 different municipalities almost all have different city governments, different mayors, different police chiefs, all of that. And so we know in St. Louis that I can enter a certain neighborhood and the police are going to respond a certain way to me versus not. But I could travel 6 blocks east and enter a totally different neighborhood and have a totally different interaction. And so it adds another layer of, from the public's point of view, I don't know what I'm getting. And if I'm not from St. Louis and I'm traveling through, I'm certainly not going to know what I'm getting and where or why, because there are all of these inconsistencies. And so those inconsistencies trickle down in every single level throughout the police department. So one of the things in terms of solutions, and I love the bill that's going on in Colorado right now, because it actually talks about the body cameras and how to use the body cameras. The one thing that I will note here is that in addition to accountability, positive reinforcement, which means that we get recognized or some sort of feedback about what we're doing right, needs to be written into all action. The best way to establish the behaviors and the things that we want to happen and keep those things going is to tell people when they're doing things right. So I'm actually working with a local police department. They're getting ready to implement body cameras, and we're actually going to use it as every week the command staff are going to check in and provide positives about what they're doing right. So we can go to the next slide. So here in training, you know, one of the big things, the post-certification, even there is just lack of training. There's inconsistencies across all police academies. So, you know, coming up with what are the consistent things that we need to know? How do we measure these things? In behavior analysis, we talk about competency-based training, which means that you actually demonstrate the skill in the environment that we want you to do that. So looking at even using some virtual technology, virtual reality technology, so that police officers can practice the skills without having real people involved, and master them at such a level that we feel really confident that they are ready to go and do these things when they are actually interacting with the with the citizens and civilians. So that's looking at standardizing training across all academies, using evidence-based training methods, which works in like, I'm going to tell you what to do, I'm going to show you how to do it, and then I'm going to have you practice it, I'm going to give you feedback on it, and you're going to keep practicing until I feel like you've met this standard measure. And then also focusing on the de-escalation. I can't tell you, we are now working with these police officers, and we did all these ride-alongs, and the number one thing that they told us was they were so excited that we were going to teach them how to de-escalate, because none of them felt like they knew how to do that. And when we talk about use of force, like that is huge. If I don't know how to de-escalate someone and I'm super nervous because I haven't been trained super well, and this person is escalating, I am much more likely to pull out a gun, because that's going to get things under control very quickly. And every time it gets things under control very quickly, then I'm much more likely to do it again in the future, and much more quickly. So I pull out the gun the first time, it works. Next time, that's my go-to thing. So it's not just about accountability, but it's looking at that training, because they have to be comfortable doing these things. And then we have to oversee them and make sure that they do them right. Next slide. And then the last one is community interaction. And I'm going to try and not go too behavioral on you. But there are two big problems, and learning theory, behavior learning theory tells us all of this. And if you want to know more, I can send you kind of the research that really dives into that. But there are two main things. One is lack of exposure and relationship with the people that are that police officers are interacting with, i.e. the community members. So if I don't have a lot of exposure to somebody or a group of people, the only thing that I really have to rely on are the past learnings, which are from people telling me about them, watching it on the news, reading other things like that. We know that certain populations have a mostly negative narrative in the news. You know, when I watch Channel 2 news every single morning, all I hear about are like crimes and killings and shootings on the north side of St. Louis. So if I don't have much experience with the north side of St. Louis, and now I'm a police officer, I'm already going in with all of these assumptions, right? Like I'm already going in with a little bit of fear. I don't have anything to counteract that. I can't say, I know Marcus from the north side, or I know Tim from the north side, and they're good people. I don't have any of that. The other thing is that more often than not, when a police officer arrives on scene, it is not because we're celebrating something. It is because there is a problem. And a lot of times, especially for communities that are very heavily policed, police officers are arriving on scene, and that is a stimulus that tells me a bunch of bad things are about to happen. And so when that happens, you now have a police officer who's expecting bad things to happen. You have a community member who's expecting bad things to happen. Escalation is already there. And unless you have somebody that is super well trained in how to de-escalate that, you're going to have a very negative interaction. So the way to turn that around is the day they start training is to have very deliberate and frequent positive interactions and ensure that those happen all like throughout their entire career. Next slide. And I know I'm going super, super fast. So quick summary, just remember it does affect all of us, even when we don't necessarily have a lot of direct interactions with police officers, it affects us. There are very real, very evidence-based solutions that will make huge differences. And then focusing on these three main things of accountability, training, and relationship building.